they have this strategy that's all based on technology. So right now, as we're answering phones, something they haven't done so far. Yeah, but even with that said,
Andy? Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Just by way of introduction, because we have a new individual here that we're delighted and welcome. This is our prayer book. Maybe there's one by your seat or underneath. There you go. And the Hebrew prayer book opens from left to right because Hebrews read from right to left. We're going to begin just with a moment of silence before lighting the Shabbat candles. And Iris and Nate, would you like to do the honors? Okay. So we'll just take a moment of silence and then come up and light the candles. You're ready to welcome the Shabbat. Page 120.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hails us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom. And this week we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel Independence Day, the establishment of the State of Israel. Our service will be interspersed with Israeli songs as well as the beautiful Hatikva. So let us rise and join in the singing of Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem, page 678.
Amen.
continue now with the beautiful Dodi Li from Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, page 128. And we continue now with the beautiful Lecha Dodi, Come My Beloved, to greet the Kala, the bride. The bride here, of course, is the Shabbat. Come My Beloved, the speaker is God, and the beloved is Israel. Shabbat is one of the great gifts that God has given, or that the divine has given to all of humankind, a day of rest, a day designated for reflection, for spirituality, and of love. Page 138, the first two verses, and then on page 139 we will rise and welcome the spirit of Shabbat. Lecha Dodi.
Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Pernei Shabbat, Mekabela. Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Pernei Shabbat, Mekabela. Shamor v'zachor, b'dibore
face the ark. Again, we are interspersing many readings from the Yom HaAtzmaut service because this is the week where we celebrate the establishment of the State of Israel, the Jewish homeland. A reading by Albert Einstein. Whatever we do for the land of Israel, we do it for the honor and the well-being of the whole Jewish people. Because Israel, the establishment, the existence of the State of Israel is felt and ennobles all of us as a people. We remain standing now for the Baruch Hu on page 146. You may be seated. On page 540 is the Declaration of Independence that was promulgated as part of the establishment of the State of Israel on page 540. Impelled by this historic and traditional attachment, Jews strove in every successive generation to reestablish themselves in their ancient homeland. In recent decades, they returned in their masses. Pioneers, immigrants coming to Eretz Yisrael, in defiance of restrictive legislation, and defenders, they made the desert bloom, revived the Hebrew language, built villages and towns, and creating a thriving community, controlling its own economy and culture, loving peace but knowing how to defend itself, bringing the blessings of progress to all the country's inhabitants, and aspiring towards independent nationhood. We continue now, as part of the establishment of the State of Israel, we also have to understand that the basis for the State of Israel is the Torah. The Torah was in the hearts of generation after generation. And that if we really study the Torah carefully, and as we particularly get into the later sections of the Torah, we find that it is a conditional inheritance. It is dependent upon us being a righteous people, to being a holy people, and to act in accordance with the great and underlying principles of the Torah. And that is what is encapsulated before the Shema as we sing the Yahavat Olam on page 150. Are intimately connected.
Chukim umishpatim
Please rise for the Shema, page 152 and 153, followed by the V'ahavta on page 154. The Shema, of course, is the central declaration of our faith, our pledge to God to acknowledge God's unity, God's oneness, and God's uniqueness, and to love God with all of our hearts, and with all of our soul, and with all of our might. Page 152. Hashkivenu on page 160 and 161. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu, ועל כל עמו ישראל, ועל ירושלים, השכיבנו. There is no beauty like the beauty of Yerushalayim, of Jerusalem. 10 measures of beauty were given to the world. 9 of them were given to Jerusalem, and 1 was given to the rest of the world. And that's taken from Avot de Rabbi Natan, the principles of Rabbi Natan. It's also found in the Talmud Kedushin, which is holiness, on page 40, on page 49b. Let us rise now for the Amidah on page 164, and we'll continue through page 170.
That my mouth may declare your praise.
either in the prayer book or in your own silent meditations. If you wish to be seated, of course you may. In the prayer book, it continues from page 172 through page 180. The traditional prayers are on the even number page, and the more contemporary renderings are on the odd number pages.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai.
Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Holiness and Israel are directly connected. I was going to speak exclusively about holiness, but as this is the week of Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day, I think it's important for us to reflect on two aspects of Israel. The first is the historic aspect, and the second is the religious aspect of Israel. What is Israel's mission? What is Israel's purpose? From a historic standpoint, Israel was always kept alive from the time of the exile, from the time of the diaspora, even before the destruction of the Second Temple, when Jews began to disperse and go throughout the world. If you read the prayer book of the 9th century, you'll see prayers that specifically refer to Zion, specifically refer to Yerushalayim. And there was always this hope and belief that at some day God would gather the remnant, the She'erit Yisrael that's referred to in Jeremiah, that that remnant would one day return to the land of Israel, that God would redeem. Ezekiel prophesied that not only would God gather that remnant, but would moreover raise up the dry bones, those who had died in generation after generation, longing for the return to Israel, that God would gather all those dry bones and place sinew on them and restore them to Israel. And Jews kept that dream alive for 1,878 years. Prior to that, in 1894, and a little bit before, about 1894, there was a trial in France. A secular Jew by the name of Theodor Herzl, a lawyer but became a journalist, covered that trial. And we all know that Captain Alfred Dreyfus was Jewish, that he was a captain in the French army, accused of treason, and that the evidence was trumped up against him. And he was wrongfully convicted, though later released after serving time. And Herzl covered this trial. But what impressed him was the mob that was on the outside. There was anti-Semitic slogans and hatred directed toward Captain Alfred Dreyfus and French Jewry that had become citizens of France. And it was his vision, it was his insight that said that Jews would never be accepted in the countries of Europe because the Jews were a separate people. The Jews could never be fully integrated, fully accepted into European society, despite the Age of Enlightenment, despite their acceptance legally into the various states of Europe. That anti-Semitism would always remain because the Jews were in fact distinct. And so Theodor Herzl founded the Zionist movement. And it was his vision that moved us towards a state of Israel. And in 1948, just 54 years after the publication of their Judenstaat, the Jewish state, where he wrote about anti-Semitism, and he wrote about his vision of what that Jewish state would look like. And he said, yes, there would be Jewish criminals. There would be crime. There would be Jewish garbage collectors. All the things involving a state that it would take for the Jews to have a homeland. His vision was that it would be a homeland for the Jews. And there was an odd proposal about Uganda and so forth because times were getting very difficult. But the Zionist Congress, Jews refused to go anywhere but Israel. Now it's often thought, and you hear this among non-Jews, that the state of Israel came about because of the Holocaust. There, of course, is some truth to that, but statehood would have happened anyway. It may have been delayed, but there was already the infrastructure in place. There were already the institutions of governance in place, so that when statehood was declared and the two-state solution was accepted by Israel, Israel was in a position to govern. They were in a position to accept statehood. That's why Israel succeeded. And that's an untold story. That the people had a will to become a state, to have a land of their own, and did the hard work necessary to have a system in place, to have the institutions of governance in place. They understood modern economics. They understood democracy. And therefore, the state of Israel thrived. The state of Israel was born, and the state of Israel continues to exist to this day. But that's only half the story. That's only half. Because the other half isn't a secular, but is a vision of what Israel is supposed to be. And that brings us to this week's Parsha, Kedoshim, holiness. The grant of Israel and the foundation, really the foundation of Zionism, or what resonated for Jews to coalesce, was the promise of God to Abraham. That was what motivated, that's what enlightened, that's what stirred the hearts of Jews, secular and religious Jews, was the promise by God to Abraham that his descendants would have a land of Israel. And not only would they have a land of Israel, but it was to be a land filled with justice and righteousness and concern for the widow, concern for the orphan, concern for the poor, that there would be one law applied equally. There would be equal protection under the laws. If you read the Torah closely, you'll see that that was a principle, a fundamental principle for the biblical vision of Israel. And so you have these two dynamics. One is Israel as a secular state, and Israel as envisioned in the Torah. And what we must do as Jews, what we must do in our support for Israel is synthesize those two. It shouldn't just be a secular. I'm not talking about observance, Shabbat, and all of that. I'm not talking about that, as you know. I'm talking about v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that you should love your neighbor as yourself. And there's Rabbi Akiva, who lived in Israel during the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 130, said this is the great principle. This is the ikar, this is the essence of Torah. The love of God that we just prayed. And these prayers, by the way, go back to post-temple period. The Ahavat Olam is described in the Mishnah, which was composed in 230. It's referenced in the Talmud, 425 CE. These were prayers that probably existed during the Second Temple period, that you should love God, and that God's love is everlasting. And God's love was manifest to us through Torah, through mitzvot, through commandments, the prelude to the Shema, the central declaration of our people that we just chanted. All of that was to be expressed and lived by in the state of Israel, in Israel. And that's how we were to be in Or Lagoyim, a light unto the nations. Not that other nations should be just like Israel, or not that other nations should follow the Torah, or other people should. But from those principles of Torah, in a land that we would call our own, other nations would learn from us, would see us as a model nation. And we are not there yet. We are not there yet because these underlying principles, while they are manifest in Israel, are not complete yet. They're still, like every other state in the world, like every other country in the world, has its difficulties, has its problems. But what we must do as Jews is impress upon Israel, our brethren, our sisters who are there, that Israel is two parts. It's not just a secular state. It is Kedoshim. Its vision is to be a holy state. and be an Or Lagoyim, in doing that, become a light unto the nations. Shabbat Shalom.
I was born to this world, and named Israel, a child bestowed I am young, but I've grown to be Israel, sacred land that the lost call home. As I dwell by the sea, far from distant shores, bleeding arms reach to me the promised land. Nothing may live, I too must live, so my heart knows. Keep me free, hear my plea, give me your Just as long as you need us, and with open arms you greet us, we will hear you, Israel. We'll be near you, Israel. Oh, we hear you, yes, we hear you, Israel.
Our service continues now with the Mishaberach prayer, the prayer for healing, page 371.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
We pray for the healing of Babette Friedman, Rhoda Bennett, Harold Fink, Glory Weisberg, David Cherniak, Phyllis Feibelman, Dr. John Johnson, Mark and Hetty Blinderman, Elise Zeman, Jennifer and Amy Sundberg, Pam Fisher, Alice Glass, Cheryl Bloom, Elizabeth Kaiser, Sheila Ross, Sandy Holberg, Alan Lewis, Emily Fink, Rick Finn, Mike Ware, Larry Miller, Bruce Glover, Lisa Haifizi, Joseph Kenny, Aline Moran, Jennifer Guggenbiller, and Elaine Berman. Is there anyone who you would like to add to this list for healing?
Aaron LeMay.
Thank you. Please rise for the Alenu, page 586 and 591. You may be seated. This week we observe the yahrzeits of Sam Milstein Jr., Ralph G. Holberg Sr., Rosalie Rossner, Alma Frank, David Gardberg, and Elia C. Rotella. Is there anyone observing a yahrzeit who they wish to remember at this time? Please.
Mark Aaron Siegel.
Thank you. Anyone online who's observing a yahrzeit? No. Let us rise and recite the Mourner's Kaddish, page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah, b'yalma divrach hidutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach, le'olam u'le'armei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, da'amiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehi Shlomo Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru Amen. May God, who establisheth peace unto the heavens, grant peace and comfort in the hearts of all who mourn, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. We want to welcome the people who are with us virtually. Shirley Boyd, Harold and Emily Fink, James Perry, my wife Maggie, Steve Mulfelder, Karen and Hemath Singh, Elaine and Ron Berman, Roy Hoffman, Leonard Wells, Larry Miller, and Marion Birkin. We're going to now like to, Anne, would you like to do the Kiddush for us? We're going to turn to page 123. Before we conclude our service, not only with Kiddush and Motzi, but with two Israeli songs, a kind of medley, which I'll announce the page numbers after we finish Kiddush. There's religious school at 10:30. There's a Yom HaAtzmaut celebration at Ahavat Chesed, and that will begin at 3 o'clock on Sunday, from 3 o'clock to 5. Torah study continues on Wednesday at 5. Oh, excuse me, tomorrow morning is our May Shabbat service, because April, we're at the 29th now, and I'm going to be out of town next week, and Nate and Ann and Howard have graciously agreed to help to help lead services next week. So we're pushing the Shabbat ahead because I love our Shabbat morning services. So as an accommodation, we're doing it. Our May Shabbat service is actually April 29th.
And breakfast.
Breakfast, right? Breakfast at 9:30. There's some delicious Danish.
Service without breakfast.
Absolutely, with full stomach. That's right. So that's at 9:30, and services will be at 10:30. Okay. Please rise for the Kiddush, page 123.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kasho b'yahava uvratzon inkilanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehillah l'mikrae kodesh, zeker l'tziat Mitzrayim, ki Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
You may be seated. We're going to conclude our service on page 652 and page 654 with Bashana Haba'ah and Hava Nagila on page 654.
I'll try to make it a little easier. We'll do the first and third verse of Bashana, and then the refrain, the Otire, and then we'll turn the page, and we'll go, if you need the words for Hava
No,
Nagila.
the first verse and then...
So we'll do the first verse and then the third verse of Bashana, and then Hava Nagila.
Right. It's all there on page 652.
Just sing something really loudly, you know? That's what I'm gonna do.
Shabbat Shalom. That's my voice.
No standards, I see it. It's okay. You didn't have to stand. I was trying to get y'all up.